I don't know about you. Maybe this says something bad about me. If I get a cold, I go straight to the internet to see what's wrong with me. Anybody do that besides me? You don't have to confess. I think I'm the only one. You know, if we're really sick, we go to the doctor and then we go home and we go to webmd.com or Mayo Clinic, and we find that 0.003 of 1% has this dreaded illness, and that's automatically us. And then we start making plans to travel to Cleveland or Mayo. I read this week of a senator who went to Canada to get some health care. I thought that was a little unusual. But I want you to imagine this morning that Mr. Trump and Mrs. Pelosi are both diagnosed with the same illness. Whatever it is, I don't know. It might be stubbornness. They're both diagnosed with the same illness. And we hear the news tonight that both of them have gone to a Muslim country to find healing. What in the world would we say? Would we be astounded? Shocked? If you can imagine that, you can sort of imagine what's going on in our text today. We're talking about overcoming, and we're going to talk about overcoming prejudice. And I know we've gotten rid of a lot of prejudice in the last 30, 40, 50 years, but I got to be honest with you. Down deep, I don't know about you, but there's still some that resides deep in the recesses of who I am. And it may not be skin color. It may be a lot of other things. So I want us to talk about overcoming prejudice. And when we do, I want us to look way, way back to the book of 2 Kings, and this is in chapter 5. Chapter 5. Now, Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and was highly regarded. So I want you to see, this is somebody that the king of this area thinks is really, really at the top of the ladder. All right? Because through him, the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, if you can remember with me, when Jesus heals lepers in the New Testament, lepers in Jesus' day are required to yell. If they're within 50 feet of another human, they're required to yell, "Leper! Leper!" so that nobody comes in contact with them or is breathed on by them, so that the disease will not penetrate another person. You're also cut off from work. You're cut off from social life. You're cut off from your family. You're forced to go live in what we now call leper colonies. So that's what's going on with this guy. This very, very important guy is isolated and ostracized. But here's what happens. Now, bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken a young captive, a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She's a slave. And she said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria." Now, this is before Samaritans were bad, okay? "He would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram said. "I'll send a letter to the king of Israel." The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter I'm sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. He's packing like royalty here. And as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life?" This is kind of a really diplomatic, awkward moment here. Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to be cured to me of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me? When Elisha, the man of God, who is the second major prophet of God. Elijah's the first, then Elisha. When Elisha heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him. Now notice this. Earlier we had a slave girl. This time we have probably a slave messenger. A messenger, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry. I thought he would surely come out to me. You see, that's what you would do if you're a big-time guy. You'd send the big-time guy out. And stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Look at this. He has a preconceived notion of how his healing is going to take place. Sometimes we impose that on God too. Let's go a little further. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Remember that. Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. And Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went and he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. What's he saying? I'm not going down to that filthy river. What if somebody told you to go stand in Reedy Creek in a flood? How many of you would go to get healed of leprosy? Come on, anybody? Would anybody? 1 or 2? All right. Most of us are scared of what about out at Long Island? You think there might be something in the water? I don't know. What's he telling you? Look, Damascus is a wonderful place. We have better rivers. Did any of you ever go to a church? Did any of you ever go visit a small rural church where the baptismal, instead of stained glass, has a river, a painting of the Jordan River? Has anybody ever seen one of those? Am I the only? Come on, raise your hands high. I want to see my crowd. All right, so if you've ever seen one of those, the Jordan River looks a lot, in most of those paintings, I think the same guy painted every Baptist church in East Tennessee. The Jordan River looks a lot like it's in East Tennessee. And it looks pristine and beautiful, and there's usually some rocks in the middle. The water's trickling over like up in the Smokies or in the Blue Ridge. Well, this guy crossed the Jordan, probably waded across, and the Jordan has very little visual appeal. In fact, that's what it looks like. Do you ever want to be baptized in the Jordan? You may have wanted to do that. That's where I baptized people just a few years ago. Right there. You see how muddy it is? What you can't see, I wish I could get up here and see this. There's a little line of buoys right there. And in that little shelter over there, that's the nation of Jordan. And that buoy is the national line. And I'm one of these people that likes to say how many states I've been in and how many countries I've been in. And I thought, you know what I think I'll do? Before I baptize these people, I'll just kind of wade over there and put my feet in Jordan. That was a cool thing to do, I thought. And I looked up, and just as I was doing that, I heard movement. And 2 men with rifles appeared right under there. That caused me to break a world record getting back over here. But you see how, this is the Jordan at flood stage. You see how unappealing it is? See how, this is what it looks like even when it's down. It's really not much to look at. So what's going on here? Naaman looks at this as, that's the ugliest river I've ever seen. You think there's healing power in that water? You're nuts. I'd rather have leprosy. I want you to see the role that servants play. A servant girl tells him where to go. A servant guy comes out from the prophet Elisha, and then a servant of this man, Naaman, says, "Are you crazy? You're going to live with leprosy rather than go in that water?" And he says, "Our water's better than their water. Come on, give it a try." Now, I have to tell you, when I baptized people there, it's a real trip. We're on the bus, and the guy says, if you've ever been to Israel, we have special price on baptismal robes. Special price. I paid $12 for a robe to baptize people in that they were selling for $8 at the tourist stand right here. And has a picture of Jesus being baptized on it. And I brought it home, and Penny almost wouldn't let me bring it in the house. There's so much mud caked on it. It's just filthy. But the prophet had told me, I kept saying, "Folks, we can be baptized back in Tennessee. We got better water." Naaman says, "I'm not going to do it." And the guy says, "Listen, you got leprosy." You see, it's prejudice. I'm coming over here to these Israelis. I'm asking for healing. The least the guy can do is come out and wave his hand over me and let me go home. Prejudice ever hit anybody else? Well, it might have. Matthew chapter 13. Coming to his hometown, this is Jesus. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. "Where did this man get his wisdom and these miraculous powers?" they asked. "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't his sisters here with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him, but Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown." Look at this. And he didn't do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. 1968 was a tough year in the world. Vietnam was raging. Anti-war movements were mass protests across the country. Racial riots were breaking out in our major cities. It was a tough year. But something happened in 1968 that literally changed the perspective of some folks. It was in a country that was having even a harder time than America. It was in South Africa, where a doctor named Christian Bernard had performed 2 heart transplants. He was the first guy in the world to do them. He had done 2 heart transplants, and the third one he did was revolutionary because he took the heart of an African black man and put it in the body of a white man. Now, it wasn't the first transplant from any African to a white or any white to a black. There had already been cornea transplants and other transplants earlier. But I want you to imagine you're waiting on a transplant. And if you know anybody who's been through that process, it's harrowing. You wait on the phone call. You wait to get to the hospital. You wait to see if you're a match. I want you to imagine you get a phone call and they say, "Come to the hospital." And you start making a list. Is the donor white? Is the donor an American? Is the donor a part of my political persuasion? Are there other things about the donor I have to agree to? Would you do that, or would you just go get the heart? You see, Jesus faced prejudice. We know his mama and daddy. We know his sisters. We know his brothers. How do I overcome prejudice in my life? Because it still haunts me to this day. First of all, 5 little ideas that I think are pretty basic and elementary, but I think they're good reminders. First of all, I remember that everybody on the face of the earth, all 7 billion of us, whether I like them or not, We're all created by the same God. We may not all know God, but we're all created by God. Second, I remember that Jesus told me that every one of us is a sinner in the sight of a perfect God. Third, I remember that as a sinless one, he had every right to be separated from every one of us. But he chose to associate with all of us who would follow him. Fourth, I remember I'm not in charge of admission to heaven. God will handle that alone. That's not my call. And fifth, I remember I may be surprised to see some who are there. And they may be surprised to see me. Do you ever think about that? Anybody ever eat at Pity Pat's Porch in Atlanta? Anybody ever eat there? It's an old southern restaurant. It's based on Gone with the Wind. And if you ever go in Pity Pat's Porch, I haven't been there in years, there was you went in on this level and there were rocking chairs and there were screens constantly showing Gone with the Wind, because Pity Pat was a character in Gone with the Wind. And there was an old man down at the bottom, an old African-American man who was the maitre d'. He'd get you your table. And I have this friend who is so arrogant, and he's brilliant. He's the most brilliant guy I know, but he's so arrogant, it's incredible. And he would always tell us all the important places he'd been. So I knew he was coming to Pity Pat's Porch, and I'd been there enough with some friends that I knew this man. And I said, listen, there's a guy coming. Here's what he's going to look like. Here's what his suit. We were in town for a Baptist convention. Here's what he's going to look like. Here's what he's dressed like. He's very distinctive. Tell him when he gets here, you don't seat people like him. It cost me $10, but it was worth it. We're sitting there at a beautiful, at that time they had a buffet, salad bar or something. We're sitting there watching, and here comes my friend in all of his pomposity. Down the stairs, he walks down and he looks at this gentleman who was an elderly guy, great guy. And he says, my name is blank, I have a reservation for 8. And this guy looks at him deadpans. He says, I'm sorry, sir. We don't seat your kind here. And my friend went, what? I'm thinking this could escalate. This could be fun. And he says, what did you say to me? He said, we don't seat your kind here. And just out of the corner of his eye, he caught me giggling. And he looked at the guy and he busted out laughing. He said, if you seat his kind, you seat my kind. You ever felt excluded? You ever felt like they didn't want our kind there? I want to tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a pastor in Memphis told me this, and I've never forgotten it after 20 years. There was a young child in his church, a teenager. Life taken in an accident. I don't remember what kind it was. I just remember that life was taken. And the family was able to donate her organs. Sometime later, my pastor friend was able to arrange a meeting between the parents and the recipient of the heart. And the mother embraced the recipient. And my friend said she did something that none of us will ever forget him telling. After she hugged him, she said, I know this is unusual and you may deny the request, but could I put my ear next to your chest? he said, of course. She said, I want to hear my child's heartbeat one more time. Do you think that heart recipient cared whether that girl was a Baptist or a Methodist or anything else? You think that heart recipient cared how that girl voted? Do you think that heart recipient cared about anything other than the fact that somebody had given him life? You see, I think that's what God expects of us. Let's pray.